Welcome to Stories of the Lockdown, a podcast by India Spend and Nikor Associates. Here, we seek to shed light on women's narratives during COVID-19. The pandemic has disproportionately affected women, deepening pre-existing gender divides and setting back gender equality. While each episode will have a different sub-theme, the broader focus will remain on women and their lives under the lockdown. For today's episode, I, Ishita Upadhyay, will be your host. I'm joined by Ms. Pragya Khanna, co-founder at Roha. Before we begin, a few trigger warnings. This episode will have discussions of sexual harassment or abuse. So, hi Pragya, my first question for you is, can you please introduce yourself and also introduce Roha? What kind of work does the organization undertake and what is its aim?
So I'm a Mumbai-based lawyer. I'm also a mediator and a conciliator, and now a trained mental health supporter. And I have been working in the space of gender-based harassment and sexual harassment and abuse for a few years now. So I've had, the benefit of grassroots as well as some policy-related and organizational work-related experience in the space. And I was associated with another organization, but in November 2019 is when I co-founded Roha. And Roha is a non-profit, which is again grassroots-oriented work. We focus on a couple of issues, one being gender-based harassment, sexual harassment and abuse, which could be in educational institutions, workplaces, it could be communities and society alike, and sustainable consumption, which is where we do cleanup drives and recycling and upcycling initiatives, primarily focusing on school children and communities. So this is what Roha has been doing, and recently we have also started collaborating with other organizations on more specific issues that are associated with our work. So we are focusing on separate modules for our workshops for domestic violence, for online harassment and cyber safety. We've also got members of the LGBTQIA plus community on board with us now. So we're curating modules on gender inclusion and sensitivity in schools, colleges, and at the workplaces. And so our main aim is conducting workshops, which is more awareness and rights-based advocacy work. Along with that, we also provide redressal support. We are Bombay-based, but we provide redressal pan-India. We have a network of people like lawyers and mental health workers that we rely on for ensuring timely and effective redressal reaches the person who's reached out to us. And we do a lot of collaborations with individuals and organizations. Recently, we did an event called Beyond the Blood 2021, which was about holistic and inclusive conversations on menstrual health and well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. So in your experiences with Roha, what are the ways in which you believe sexual harassment or abuse has kind of adapted and changed in virtual workspaces?
So it has and it has not at the same time. And the reason is that when it comes to the law, very early on, I would say maybe even 2 decades ago. So, before the Act on Sexual Harassment at the Workplace came about, generally we had, labor legislation that by way of, an extension of having a dignified workplace and a safe workplace would sort of look into issues of sexual harassment with some basic workplace policy and, regulations that industries and organizations would sort of set in place. But the courts had in fact, given judgments, like there was a Delhi High Court judgment in 2008, which had explained that when you talk about a workplace, you do not confine it only to a physical, a brick and mortar office. You don't just limit it to workspace in that conventional sense that we understand it, but it can and it may also include places that you visit in relation to during the course of your employment to get work done, which is in association with your employment. It could also include your dwelling place, your residence, places which are basically an extension or are in contiguous of workplace as we normally understand it. And recently, the Rajasthan High Court earlier this year reiterated the fact that, when we refer to sexual harassment at the workplace and we look at the definition of workplace, it includes online harassment and virtual workspaces. So all of this has only been clarified by the courts, and in spirit and in a sense, because the nature of sexual harassment has always been subjective, and the definition of workspace and workplace is so wide that it has always intended to include a work from home concept or a virtual workspace concept. And the recent trends is that it has probably come out a little bit more in the open because of the pandemic, that everyone's been at home and everyone is working from home. Even those jobs that were not supposed to be a work from home sort of nature of jobs, everybody had to somehow in one way or the other transition to an online working environment. And the effect of this has been that people who would usually complain about similar problems and maybe call them as sexual harassment at the workplace in a physical working environment are now experiencing similar behavior by colleagues online. So it would, include your text messages. A lot of people are using Microsoft Teams, so chats or software that, companies rely on for internal chat systems, emails, and WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is extremely intrusive now, whether it's customer care, whether it is, post-purchase support services, whether it's us lawyers or medical, experts. Literally everything is now available online or is available through WhatsApp. And I think WhatsApp has, just sort of become like synonymous with emails and, work chats, etc., because it's something that people find oddly comfortable. But the whole idea of WhatsApp was connectivity initially. So it's a personal space that has now become a space where people are doing business, are exchanging messages and information with colleagues, with people that they work with, or their clients and their customers. And I think a couple of other challenges that have happened is that, when you were in a physical working environment, you were subjected to an office space in a particular city, and you may or may not be required to travel much. So your interaction perhaps with colleagues from other states, cities, offices or branches of your organization and clients would have been minimal. But because of, the ease of working and interacting online, remotely, I think the interaction between colleagues could have increased, because you may be now interacting with people from your organization that are from very diverse cultures, from different states, because every office, every state, every city has a distinct culture of its own. And it's when you understand, gender sensitization and sexual harassment at the workplace, you cannot leave this out of the conversation, that there is diversity, there are cultural differences, the subjectivity of the issue. So all of these have, sort of added to the challenges of a virtual working environment in some sense. And of course, you have the information technology laws now, which have always been there, but they become more relevant because of the remote and virtual working environment. So whether it's sending offensive messages through WhatsApp, or if it's about, what kind of background do I have when I'm on a work call or a meeting? What kind of emoticons am I using? Am I using too many emoticons when I'm conversing with my colleagues? What kind of memes or jokes that are being made? How am I dressed when I'm sitting for a work call? Am I compelling as a manager or as a senior person in the office others to turn their videos on? Or am I, giving everybody room for having an audio only meeting? Is it really necessary for me to see the person while getting the job done? And, challenges of having smaller homes, intimate environment at home. Maybe people are sort of slipping into a more casual zone because they are more comfortable in their homes while they're working, as opposed to perhaps, in a physical office where there are lots of colleagues, there are lots of eyes watching what you're doing. There's not that much privacy in that sense. And of course, we're moving to a more transparent, and egalitarian work environment, especially with the startup culture. It's a little tougher to just get away with anything, because there is some, no matter what your thought process is, there is a certain code of conduct when you walk into the door in your office. There is a certain decorum that everybody has to equally, abide by, or rather is expected to follow, which I think has somewhere gotten diluted, because it's becoming a little tough. And even senior HR managers are often asking this question, that how do we deal with this virtual workspace harassment problem, especially new people that we are recruiting, younger people that we are recruiting straight out of college, who don't know what the office culture is like, who haven't been around the seniors, haven't been around the team physically, can't gauge body language. So there are a lot of, I think the gray has become a little more gray and blurry, which always existed in sexual harassment at the workspace. So I guess with transitioning to work from home, there was also like some statistic that I was reading, where the National Commission for Women in India said that the complaints have increased by about 30% of sexual harassment at the workplace in the virtual environment. But there are also some organizations that have come out and said that the number of cases have reduced. So I think it would strongly depend on organization to organization and the culture that they've defined for themselves.
So how do you think that the kind of pre-existing frameworks to report sexual harassment or abuse, how do you think that these can be adapted to kind of take into account these new challenges with virtual workspaces and working from home?
So, see, when it comes to pre-existing framework, couple of things that we should note is that when we speak about the POSH Act, or rather the law on sexual harassment at the workplace, it applies only to women, in the sense that only women can raise complaints. But today, the first thing is that for organizations to also look out for queer employees, because it's not just women who are subjected to harassment at a workplace. I mean, it could be people of any gender, but today we are not in a position where we have a legal framework to rely on for redressal and support system, say for men or the LGBTQIA plus community. So along with having frameworks under the POSH Act, it's important to develop frameworks, maybe using the blueprint of what the Act already gives you, to create something safe for people of, for all genders at the workplace. And I think you should start with having a strong policy in place, which is easy to understand, and a policy which is anti-sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination, that's not just, about compliance and the letter, but actually is understood and imbibed in spirit through proper, good quality gender sensitization programs with all employees, including your founders and senior management, including your support staff, your clerks, your janitors, everybody, interns, volunteers, freelancers. So often people leave these people out of gender sensitization programs and just focus on their junior and mid management employees. Then I think having, regularly people from the HR or people just sort of being in touch, whether you have an anonymous system of taking up these complaints, or if you have a system where you can virtually connect on a monthly or a quarterly basis with your employees to sort of understand if there are any issues. You don't have to push them to make a formal POSH complaint, but you need to gauge if everything's okay or if there are any new developments, because we're all learning, and there could be instances of, sexual harassment at the workplace that we've never seen or known before, which could come up in a work from home scenario. And I think when people are joining, setting expectations straight right from the beginning is important at the interview and at the recruitment stage, where you let people know that you're an organization that strongly discourages any such behavior. So there are policies, there will be webinars or seminars where you will be required to give your time to and attend. Being responsive, is something that the organization should do, because I think what hasn't changed is disbelief. What hasn't changed is we still fight patriarchy, we still fight gender stereotypes. Perhaps I think it's even more complicated in a virtual working environment to deal with, hierarchy at the workplace, to sort of deal with pressure or to deal with stereotypes, because women have just, I think that's the way it's been, right? Even in world over, not just in India, that they are primary care providers at home for their children. So with the pandemic, it's that much more pressure on women to do household chores, to be expected to do that as well as work. And, it's different when you're managing the house, but stepping out to work and coming back. But if you're in that, in your house 24/7, it's almost never ending. And the lines are completely blurred between where do I stop doing household work, personal work for my family, for my children, being in the kitchen, cleaning, cooking, etc. And where do I, start working, and then where do I stop working and get back? Because it's so demanding, the work, culture today, that you're expected to be available with no travel, less leaves, people being at home. It's just crazy and chaotic at the workplace. So I think organizations need to be doubly sensitive of the fact that it's not just about sexual harassment, but it's also women, having to shoulder greater responsibilities, being burnt out much more, and then being subjected to maybe insensitive or inappropriate behavior and conduct of their managers or colleagues at the workplace. So responsiveness is something that, is something that we should emphasize on. And I think have an easy process, an anonymous process for raising issues, raising complaints, and without the pressure of reporting to the ICC, without the pressure of just making a complaint. So overall, I think organizations need to invest in taking POSH a little bit more seriously, taking gender sensitization a little more seriously, and having periodic sensitization programs.
Mm-hmm. So kind of following on from that, how do you think individuals who report sexual harassment or abuse in the workplace can be protected by their organizations or protected by the HR departments? Because obviously in these situations, there's a lot of scope to kind of either face backlash from your fellow employees or have some other kind of distress in this reporting process.
I think starting with, again, coming back to the point of sensitization, because I can give you an example from the work that I do. When I work with an organization, it's a 360-degree implementation program that we do. So starting with having the policies in place, which are gender neutral, gender expansive, however you want to put it, not just focusing on women. Second step would be gender sensitization programs. One, for the internal complaint committee members, who are the people who shoulder the responsibility of investigating, conducting an inquiry rather, into a complaint raised by an employee, a woman, if you're talking about taking it up legally under the POSH Act. And they may not be lawyers, they may not necessarily be people who have worked in the space of, say, issues related to women or gender. So they need adequate sensitization. What is the law saying? What are the expectations of an ICC member legally? How do I interpret the law? With some role play, interactive activities and practical examples to sort of demonstrate and show them what is expected of you in a real, situation where you're sitting across the table and speaking to somebody who's either reported or somebody against whom a complaint has been made, and, employees in general. So that's very important. Having sensitization programs for the employees, which is another thing, that when you talk about all these issues in a workshop, using interactive activities, using music, polls, understanding from people, what their thoughts are on this issue, automatically a lot of your work is done, because you have informed the person of what the legal framework is, which means that if you do not comply with XYZ today, there could be a backlash, in the sense that there are legal consequences of not complying, there are legal consequences of breaching confidentiality obligations, there are legal consequences of sexually harassing somebody. So these are things that it's important that are told in a simple but in an exhaustive manner as much as possible to the employees so that they fully get a grip of how is this going to practically play out, because just by reading a policy document, no one's going to feel safe enough to come and report. So I need to know that my organization today is invested in the fact that I am trying to create a safe space for you. I have got these people or this organization to come and have these sensitization programs for you. Like, we also are always offering, a follow-up Q&A to the people who attend the sessions if there is something they want to clarify, or if they want to have like an anonymous conversation without making it a big deal within the organization. So these are measures which you ought to take a little beyond what the law already sort of provides for you as a framework to rely on. And I think it's important to have a constant check and balance on inequality, power imbalance at the workplace. What is the workplace culture like, in the sense that what is the conduct and the behavior of the founders, of the senior management people, of the HR themselves, because that kind of sets the tone for people who come in and work for your organization. So if it's there's nothing wrong with having an open culture, but along with having an open and friendly culture, it also needs to be a safe and, a respectable sort of a culture where people feel confident that today, if I spoke to an HR or spoke to my manager or somebody senior, it's not going to be politicized or become like a hierarchical issue at the workplace, but it will be taken a little seriously. So I think through this and through having fair and I think like transparent investigations, or rather inquiries of these complaints that are made of sexual harassment, setting precedents the right way, depending on what your workplace policy and culture is, especially if it's multinational, or if you have, lots of different branches and offices and too many people who are running it on behalf of the main or the primary organization. So these are things that we need to emphasize on. And the main job is done in a workshop which is interactive, in a workshop that is safe, and you have to repeat it. So it can't just be a one-off thing that you've done to make somebody feel space. You have to, through repeated efforts, consistently show that, I have this infrastructure for you to rely on anytime there is a situation.
Mm-hmm. And just my final question now. So you were speaking earlier about the fact that corporations kind of need to take the issue of sexual harassment more seriously, that they already have an existing framework, but it needs to be strengthened and enhanced. So how do you think corporations can be made to prioritize women's safety and really anyone's safety from sexual harassment or abuse in the workplace? And also, do you believe that there is like a role that the government can play in helping corporations prioritize this?
So currently, where we are in terms of the law and how it's been is that there is no legal body or authority as such that is appointed under the POSH Act to oversee its implementation. So while the National Commission for Women or the Ministry for Women might be sort of looking at it in a peripheral way, in the sense to sort of take stock of maybe statistics, how many cases are reported, etc., relying on annual reports that are filed by companies in India. Number one challenge with that is that the obligation of filing annual reports, or the obligation of disclosing your compliance with having internal complaints committees in place and having complied with gender sensitization programs for your employees, and revealing data as to how many complaints were made, how many were resolved, how many sexual harassment cases were actually held as sexual harassment at the workplace post inquiry by the ICC. So all of this is something that is expected only of companies today, legally speaking. But when you talk about employers and corporations, it's not just companies, right? You have sole proprietorships, you have educational institutions, you have firms, you have so many different kinds of entities that are functioning under law, who are not technically required to follow all of this, filings that is is otherwise required of a company. So number one is that I think regardless of the nature of the entity or which law it's incorporated or constituted under, the POSH Act should make it mandatory for all employers, and organizations to have a system or a body to which these filings are made. And there has to be it can't be a one-way process. It can't just be that I've made my filing and it's done because it's a compliance thing. There should be somebody at the other side who is keeping a check and keeping a tab on how many organizations are actually truly complying with it. What is the deficiency in compliance when it comes to certain organizations who may not have constituted the ICC or may not have done their gender sensitization sessions. So that's one. Second is that because of this reason, the implementation is automatically that much weaker. Although there are provisions under the law that say that, okay, today if I'm working, say for instance, in an organization, I can report the fact that my employer has not constituted an ICC, there has been no gender sensitization done, and there are provisions where there'll be like a penalty, like a fine on the organization or the employer. In extreme cases, they say that they'll even suspend the license of that work environment. But honestly, we haven't reached that stage yet in India where this will take precedence over economic and commercial objectives. So having that organization run today is much more important to the government than shutting it down because they don't have an ICC. So it's very it's almost sort of toothless having these provisions, because nobody is going to raise a complaint against their employer. There's so much of fear today. There's so much of power imbalance still at the workplace that people are hesitating to use the framework to raise complaints. They're not going to go out of their way and file petitions saying that my organization has no ICC, so come and suspend my employer, And that means that if that organization is going to shut down or suffer, consequences, I'm either going to lose my job is threatened, I'm going to have nowhere to go to. So it's very complicated. So the best and the most effective way would be to work with all the stakeholders and respect what is at stake, for everybody, and acknowledge that, including the government's, economic interest, including the organization or the corporate's interest. So there is a commercial side to this. Not only the fact that there are too many cases of sexual harassment at the workplace, there could be a productivity issue at the workplace, there could be a reputational risk that the organization or the employer is running if too many cases are reported. And now with, the ease of posting things online, the reputational risk is much greater than it used to be pre-Me Too, than it is. And I think it's also about legal consequences to some extent, where organizations might fear tomorrow that if there are provisions that are stricter, if there is a body that is coming, maybe having quarterly or biannually coming and doing a diligence or check in my organization to see to what extent have I complied with it. Like, I went to a law school, and until my 5th year, until I raised it and figured out, due to some incident that had happened in the education institution with me, that there are laws which require my university or my college rather to have something known as, that time it was the Women Development Cell, which is also now the Internal Complaints Committee, because the law has changed in the last 6-7 years. I had to sort of raise my voice and fight it out with the principal and the management, and then they had put these backdated sort of notices everywhere to show compliance, but they had no clue what the law required. They had people appointed. There were people appointed as committee members, but those committee members did not have any idea. I just remember one person pushing a blank register in front of me and saying, okay, write down what your issue is. But that's not how it works. In 5 years, there was not one gender sensitization program. There was not one discussion on sexual harassment in college or at the workplace. I mean, for 4th and 5th year students who are going to work, and people start interning from the very first semester, of their academic pursuits these days. So I think that the government really needs to take stock of to what extent this law has failed. No doubt it's been very effective as a start for organizations to start taking this issue of sexual harassment at the workplace much more seriously now than they did earlier. But I think that you need to as a government, you need to remind organizations what all is at stake, and the fact that today, if like just to add to what I said, as a lawyer, I can tell you that when mergers and acquisitions are happening, or when say foreign organizations are looking to invest in Indian organizations, they want to see whether you are compliant with anti-sexual harassment law or not. And this is a part of the diligence exercise that is conducted. So you might, on paper today, it might be very easy for you to show compliance. You can just have any paper trail and documents evidencing that you have taken XYZ measures, but you may not have actually done that in spirit. And what I'm trying to say is that there's nobody who's going to raise their voice and say that this is all a lie, this is just on paper, and this is truly not happened. That is something that only the government can do, that only a strict provision under law can do, unfortunately, because then it becomes a legal obligation, that it's no longer a moral obligation of the employer to look into this. So we can't rely on expected integrity. We have to put legal measures in place to sort of make sure that workspaces are safer. So I think these would be some points from my side.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. This conversation has been really enlightening. And with that, we come to the end of this episode. So if you'd want to learn more about the work that Roha undertakes, you can log on to roha.org. So that's ROHAA.org. And if you've enjoyed this podcast episode, please share it with others and subscribe to never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening.